welcome Fanta Aw, and thank you so much for joining Step to the Phone. So what we do here is really to meet different women who have made a contribution to the world and try to understand their journey, and also trying to give a little bit of advice to newer generation just to help them to inspire their journey. So to start, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, where you grew up, what job you do now, and a little bit about your journey?
Okay, great. Well, it's wonderful to meet you, Christelle. So I'm Dr. Fanta Aw, and I'm currently the Vice President for Campus Life and Inclusive Excellence at American University in Washington, D.C. I'm originally from Mali, West Africa. Grew up in Mali until I was the age of 7, and then moved to Liberia. And from Liberia, moved to Washington. From Washington, moved to Kenya.
Wow.
From Kenya to Rwanda, and then back to Washington for college. Um, I did all of my K through 13 education in the French system, French international schools, and then switched systems to the American system for college. And I came to American University to do my first degree, which was in accounting and finance.
Mhm.
And then when I graduated from that program, I went and worked in Senegal. I was working in as an auditor, then came back to Washington and back to American University for my graduate degree. And my graduate degree was in public administration,
Mhm.
focus on organizational development. And when I came back for graduate school, I started to work also at the university. And so had about a 25-year career in international education here at the university, where my role was to help coordinate our international education strategy and work to support international students who are coming from all around the world to pursue their degrees or their research, along with faculty who are coming to do research as well. And so I started in the field of international education, and then moved my way from international education to a broader portfolio that included what you would call in the US system student engagement, because many US campuses, the life of the campus is a very important part of the student experience.
Mhm.
So I was overseeing portfolios that had to do with the life of the campus for students and others. And then it was in 2017 that I moved into my role as vice president for campus life. And then in 2018, my role expanded again to include not only thinking about the life of the campus, but also to begin helping the university on its strategy as it relates to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so I've been carrying portfolios since that period of time. So that's a little bit of my journey, an African woman who sort of, in many ways, part of the diaspora, part of the African diaspora that you find everywhere in the world,
Mm.
be part of the African diaspora here in the United States. And
Yeah.
my PhD is in sociology. So I'm
Wow.
a sociologist by training.
That's very inspirational, and you've moved so many places in Africa. This is incredible. You've got a little bit of flavor of different country.
Yes,
So
yes,
truly an African woman.
yes.
And I can relate to some part of your journey, because I work for 5 years for university as well. And I was looking after the student experience. So I was
Sorry.
taking care of the international students to try to
Yes,
help them integrate to the life in the UK. So I can, yeah, I can relate to that part.
absolutely. And where are you originally? Where are you originally from?
So I was born in Madagascar.
Oh, yes.
I grew up in south of France.
Okay.
And I moved to the UK when I was 18, and I've been here
Okay.
since. And yeah, when I came to university originally just for a year, but I've been in
Yeah.
the UK for 23 years now.
Wow.
So,
Well, it's a small world because my father, who was an agronomist until he retired from the World Bank, he worked in Madagascar for
oh
almost,
wow.
so he knows Madagascar very, very well because
Oh,
Madagascar was one of the countries that he spent a lot of time in. So
right.
I heard very good things from him. And then unfortunately, even though I was not too far, I never made it to Madagascar.
Well, Mali is an incredible country as well, and I wonder if you could maybe give us a little flavor for people who don't know about Mali.
Sure.
Well, Mali is very well known for the first university in the world.
That's right.
But if
Yes.
you could maybe give us a little
Sure.
flavor, a little memory of
Sure.
Mali.
Sure. So yeah, no, Mali is a place that is absolutely near and dear to my heart. And again, as I said, you know, it's within West Africa. We're landlocked,
Mhm.
unlike our neighbors like Senegal. We are landlocked. And as you mentioned, there's a very, very long and rich history in terms of sort of in terms of intellectual hub. You know, first university libraries,
Mm.
when you think of Timbuktu, and major libraries as well. And Mali has had a long history of sort of nomadic, you know, sort of what I would call exchange with the rest of the world, particularly the Middle East,
Mm.
and the kind of, you know, how Islam came to be in this part of the world, in West Africa. And for a while, we traded salt and gold. One of our exports is gold. But I
Right.
would say probably what we're most known for is music.
Yeah.
Our music is one that certainly carries over around the world. So it's one of the things that we're definitely very, very proud of. Whether you're thinking of Umu Sangare, you know, Salif Keita, and the list goes on and on and on. We have certainly exported music quite a lot during this period of time. And there's been actually a very interesting research and documentary done around the origin of blues in the US, and ethnomusicologists in the UK and in the US that have studied that and have kind of gone back to Mali to kind of look at
Mm.
what has been the kind of exchange, you know, in many ways, cultural and music exchange that's taken place as a result of these kind of exchanges culturally. So it's a place that is near and dear to my heart. Like I think most part of Africa, of course, multi-ethnic,
Mm.
multilingual, for sure, predominantly Muslim. You have a very, very small size of the population that is Christian, but it's very, very, so it's very multi-ethnic and very diverse. The north of Mali, very different from the south as well. And Malian, I think, like many others, very much travel. And so you'll find Malians, I think, everywhere you go.
Mm.
Certainly, you know, being, you know, former French colonies, French, you know,
Yes.
is quote unquote the official language. So many, you know, Malians certainly, when they leave, tend to study in countries that are francophone or
Yes.
France. But you will find, you know, the diaspora is big. It's extensive, a diaspora. Uh,
Yes. I
and we've had a lot of political changes back and forth, like most of Africa as well. And so that's a little bit of what I can say about sort of the land I was fortunate to be born in,
Mm.
that I call very much still, after so many years, I still call very much home.
Yeah, and the project I'm part what I've curated and started, which is part of this interview, is really around bringing awareness about African history and
Oh,
African
yes.
queens and kings. And I know
Yes.
you've got one of the richest man in the world, one of the
Yes,
kings,
Mansa Musa.
Mansa Musa from your
Mansa Musa is
country.
absolutely, yes, yes.
And you'll be part of this project. So we haven't done the Kings yet, but it's coming next year. What
Oh,
is
well,
share
I'm
of this?
excited. I'm excited because I think the story of Mansa Musa is a very exciting and interesting and intriguing story
Hmm.
of not just, you know, sort of what I call sort of curiosity about the world, but the
Yeah.
impact, you know, that Mansa Musa had when you think about the history, and the wealth that he accumulated as a really what
Hmm.
I call one of the first entrepreneurs that you can imagine, right?
Exactly.
In many ways. So I'm glad that you're going to be doing some of the stories of our kings and queens.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I'm quite curious to know. I know in the UK, it's a bit of a struggle because African history is not really part of the curriculum. I don't know if it's the same in America. Do you get the
Yes.
chance to even explore African history much in America?
Yeah, no, it's very sad to say that in America it's the same. The level of ignorance about Africa is staggering. What people know about Africa is what they have seen in movies, and Africa has been, I think, in many ways misrepresented on so many levels. Both our civilizations, our history, our cultures, I think, have been very much misunderstood and misrepresented. And some of that, I think, has to do with sort of, I think, a history of racialization. that has happened, I think, not only in Europe, but also in the United States, and also some certainly in places in Asia as well, where there is not an understanding of Africa's contributions to the world and Africa's contributions to so many things. So there is definitely, I would say there's a deficit in people's knowledge of Africa, a huge deficit. They kind of think back to the Tarzan, the Tarzan, sort of depiction, and it's always one where I always make it a point as an educator to really help people understand how history is so incomplete in school systems and is so incomplete in our society.
Yeah, and it's definitely the reason why I started this project to give a different narrative about Africa and the
Yeah,
history, because, like you say, it's so rich and diverse, but
yeah,
we've got a tiny image of Africa that is being portrayed by the media and by books, and it's a
yeah,
real shame. And I would like the new generation to really embody and learn about what Africa is really there to offer.
yes, yeah,
So one
absolutely.
of the questions, so we talk very much about African Queen. So the exhibition that I curated was called African Queen. So it was I used modern women to portray historical African queens. So we did some lot of photo shoot and dressing them as an African queen.
Wow.
But also nowadays in contemporary world, we use the word, "Oh, I'm an African queen." People use it there and then. I wonder, how do you react? Do you embody that word? Do you say you are an African queen? Do you recognize into that word?
I, I think it's one of those words that I am proud and humble to claim.
Right?
And part of the reason perhaps I am okay with claiming it is because I do believe that my generation has achieved what is achieved because we, in many ways, come from great societies, and that the women who came before us, in many ways, have uplifted us. I often say that I stand on the shoulders of giants. Generations of women within my family who in many ways have taught me what it means to be a woman, but also what it means to be an independent woman, what it means to be a woman who aspires to want to contribute to the society in which I live, and to know that there's been a rich, rich legacy of African queens all throughout Africa and their contributions to society, in many ways, I think calls me to do the same in terms of how can I responsibly contribute to society. And so when I think of African queens, I think about strong women who fought their way to get things done, who thought about their societies first, and made sacrifices that even to this day, I think are hard for many of us to even fathom the level of sacrifices that they've done in order for the next generation to be in a better place, in order for the societies that they are in to be in a better place. And I think that's what comes to me when I think about the depiction of African Queen. It's about beauty, but it's not about physical beauty. It's about just sort of beauty of understanding and appreciating what you have and where you are, and wanting to have a strong desire to do everything you can to create a better world. That's what comes to mind when I think about African Queen. And then also the other part about African Queen that I claim is I find African women to be incredibly creative, incredibly creative. Everything from hair and what we do with our hair and the kind of contributions it's made to the world, right? To what we do aesthetically with clothing and fashion and all of that, to how we kind of think about food and the aesthetic of food, art and how we think about art in its so many different permutations and everything. There's also another piece of the African Queen, which is the aesthetic. And that is something that speaks greatly to me as well, because I do think that that is something that's incredibly important and uplifting in any society, and something that I think, again, I feel proud to be part of that heritage and legacy.
Yes, and it's that one thing that really I wish. I mean, I got, well, I moved to France when I was about 10, and I got caught up in that European culture, and all I
Yeah.
was seeing was women with straight hair, and
Yeah.
I wanted to have straight hair too. So I went
Yeah.
through a period where I was straightening my hair for a long
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
Until I had my own daughter, and I actually say, oh no, I don't want her to go through this. So
Yes.
I'm
Yeah.
starting to leave my hair natural. But this is
Yes.
one thing that the younger generation, I wish they can really
Yes.
embody as well. Be proud of your own natural hair.
Yeah.
Be proud of your African culture,
Yes.
your
Yes.
clothing,
Yeah.
everything that
Ab-
represents us.
yeah. No, absolutely. I think absolutely, we give the example of the hair, but even just when you see in, European butter, in European beauty products, shea butter is the big thing.
Mm,
In Mali, we produce so much shea butter, and our grandparents and great grandparents understood, what in many ways are the nutritional values,
mm,
and and the minerals and everything that are in shea butter and others, right? And we use shea butter in all of its form for cooking. We use it when you're not, you're having pains. We use shea butter for the hair, and now you see all of these beauty products that are out there in the market and that are claiming shea butter and how expensive they are. Something we knew way, way, way back. It's been part of our traditions forever. And there's so many things like this in terms of what people know and the knowledge, the indigenous knowledge that is.
mm.
And I think particularly for this generation, it's incredibly important. I would say you can't know where you're going unless you know where you're coming from.
Yes. Okay.
Understanding the history, understanding your culture, being proud of that
Yeah.
is something that I think is incredibly important.
Mm. I mean, I also know Mali has got a very long traditions of the use of indigo, which is
Oh,
not, and it's not
absolutely.
very well understood
Yes,
by in the West how important that tradition, even in
absolutely.
the ancestry, because it was
Yes.
given by generation to
Oh,
generation
yeah.
how to make the
Yes.
indigo, and
Yes.
it's a fascinating story.
It is.
uh,
It's, I mean, it is, indigo, and also, mudcloth, right?
yeah,
Mudcloth
yeah.
that you see in museums, you see in so many art, kind of displays, you see with clothing that had picked up, the mudcloth, is one of those things that we call in Mali Bogola, that came from the Dogon tribes
Yeah.
in Mali. And the other thing as well that people don't know is, for example, astronomy.
Yeah.
And how, the Dogons had a very, very sophisticated and elaborate notion of understanding these pieces
Mm.
and so forth, and that have gone on generations and generations. So this is important for people to understand, because when we talk about, civilizations, there's often this misconception that it started, in the West, and it did not.
Mm.
There's so many other, areas of the world that have contributed to what we now are looking at and are seeing. And so that's an important piece. And our young generations, it's not that they're not interested, is that it's not taught. It's not in the history books,
Yeah.
not in the school systems that they're going into. So the
Yeah.
question it raises is how and when can they learn this if it's not captured in the educational system, which in many ways socializes us.
Yeah, I've not been to Mali yet, but it is on my list of country to go. But the only reason I haven't been is because I always say, oh, if I go to Mali, I need to be there for a month at least,
At
because
least.
there is so much I need to learn. I am really interested about fabric. I do a lot of work
Yes.
around fashion.
Oh,
So fabric, the Dogon tribe and
yes.
the community there, it's really fascinating. Yeah, all the stars and the astronomy,
Yeah.
incredible story. So
Yeah.
definitely I will have to find a month and go. And
You
I've
do.
always
I
dreamed
I
to take the
I
train from
invite you to
Dakar,
come. Yes.
to Timbuktu.
So Timbuktu, yes. You definitely, you definitely want to come and visit. You really
Mm,
want to visit, because there's a fascinating history that's there. And the good news, Christelle, and is that you can still see the vestige of it, right? You can,
right, okay, great.
but those are things that traditions that I'm very concerned will disappear.
Mm.
Like
I
even from
was wondering, is
going to
your
disappear.
background Mali?
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
but interesting enough, this background, believe it or not, and the reason why I have it It's from Oman.
Oh, okay.
But this is what I would see in Mali.
Yeah, it does look
This
like
is again, the blending and
the
the
Arabs.
hybridity of culture,
Mm.
and how cultures in many ways traverse, because for Oman had a connection to, to Zanzibar.
Right, okay.
And when you look at some of the architecture in Zanzibar, it reminds me so much of the architecture that I see in Mali. And it
Mm.
was fascinating by this blending of cultures
Yeah.
from different places, which lets you really understand and know that there's been a lot of travel and a lot of mixing of cultures.
Yeah, and of course Zanzibar, they used to have Sultan living there. So
Absolutely.
yeah.
Yes. Yes.
The,
Absolutely.
the Muslim was there, yes.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Earlier you mentioned that you are standing in the shoulder of giants. I'm just wondering, is there a specific person or character that you really inspired you? Any strong woman, powerful woman in history, or maybe nowadays contemporary women that you look up to for inspiration?
Um, I would say the women who have inspired me have been really women in my own family. I think about my grandmother, my paternal grandmother. I think about my maternal grandmother. I think about the fact that my paternal grandmother had 7 other sisters. So this is I grew up in what I call a matriarchal society in many ways.
Mhm.
And I could see on a daily basis, the impact of these women in my life, but in the lives of our communities.
Mm.
So I've been deeply inspired by that generation of women who are incredibly smart, very astute, may not have gone to school, but what I often say, their knowledge base surpasses anybody with 5 PhDs, because they knew how to navigate the world and they understood the society that they were in, and really their creative energies and so forth is something that I really, really admire. So I would say that's an example of women, matriarchal sort of ways that I admire. With that said, and my mother as well is another person that has been a real inspiration to me. With that said, when I look at our world today, I see African women entrepreneur, whether it's in the business sector, whether it's in the sciences now. You're seeing many of our economies and the role that women continue to play. We always knew and we always used to say that in many ways, women shoulder much of the responsibility and burden for progress in our societies. We've known that for so long. But to see the generations of women that have been coming through and their entrepreneurial spirit, whatever they've chosen to do, is something that keeps me inspired.
Mm.
It keeps me really inspired in many ways. That's the piece that comes to mind. Because I also say that to me, there's the danger of putting on a pedestal one person. And that we always say that the saying that it takes a village is something that I deeply believe. And so I think even for that person on a pedestal, it has taken a village investing in them for them to be who they are today. And we're a very collectivist society. It's not about I, it's about the we.
Mm.
And I always like to think about the we and the role of the we in our societies.
Yeah, and I think that's something we've lost over the
Yes.
years.
Yeah.
Is we're becoming the family
Yes.
becoming smaller and smaller,
Yeah.
and that's part of
Yeah.
why some of the generation are a bit lost, because we don't have
Absolutely.
that village
Yes.
to support them.
To support you.
Mm.
Yep. To support you. Absolutely. This idea that you live in multi-generational homes.
Mm.
The wisdom that come from the generations are things that are lost. The notion and the nucleus of what family is, and knowing that it's your mom, it's your dad, it's your sibling, but it's your grandparents, it's your aunt, it's your uncle, it's the neighborhood in which you live that you consider.
Mm.
Those are notions that I think are incredibly important. And I will say, go even further and say, Christelle, when you see the world that we're in and you hear so much about mental health issues in Europe and the US and everywhere else, part of the reasons we're seeing such situations at an increase is because the core fabric is no longer there.
Yeah.
The core fabric of community and society and family in many ways have undergone a transformation, and you can see the impact on individuals and communities. So there's a lot that I think today folks can learn about what we have known for a very long time in our cultures.
You've had an incredible journey, and I would like to find out a bit more what have contributed to your success, but maybe also what have been some of the challenges you had to overcome to get where you are today.
Yeah. Well, let me start with the challenges. I think I often say in this case, I would say the triple jeopardy of being Black, being a woman, being from Africa. Certainly things, depending on the world that we're living in, where people have their misconceptions about who we are and what we're about and what we believe. So you know that you have to work 20 times harder. You know that you have to be 10 times better at what you do in order for the doors to open and to remain open. I think those are certainly challenges that we face in our roles as women, and as Black women in particular, and as African women. So that would be a challenge that I have seen. And that challenge gets compounded depending on what field you go into that is predominantly male dominated in some ways. So there's some of that as well. But what I have learned and what I would say has contributed probably most to my success are really the values and traditions that was imparted to me by my family. And it's the value of human relations and investing in human relations and this idea of a collectivist society. Thinking about we and thinking about others and not just me. I think that's been important. It's about the authenticity of one's voice and how important that is. To be proud of who I am and unapologetically so, and not have to, apologize for that. But in fact, to claim it and name it is important. And to get as much, in my case, because of where I've chosen to live, get as much education as I can. Because my father always said, it is that investment that no one can take away from you. They can take away your home, they can take away your car, they can take away all of these trappings. But the one thing they can't take away from you is what's in your mind and how you have built up your mind for where I've chosen to live in the US. That's become incredibly important to me. So education has been central to my family for the longest time. And I always talk about education in two ways. It's clearly the education of what I call book education, but there's the education of life. And, how you would navigate the world, how you understand your environment and things. Those are things that you learn by observing, by listening, and you learn through an iterative process. And it's something that for me is an incredible part of it, because it's not just enough to have the book learning. You have to have the learning of experience, and you have to have the learning of sort of what I call sort of intuition and perceptions as well. You have to be perceptive in life. And I've had to learn that. And I think that has contributed immensely to, I think it has contributed immensely to where I am today. And then lastly is whatever space you enter it being prepared.
Yeah. Well, that's also really relate to my last question that I was going to ask. If you had to give an advice to the younger generation or to your younger self, what would you say to them?
If I had to give advice to the younger self, make sure you do your homework to know who you are. Take pride in who you are and be okay with that first and foremost. Otherwise, if you don't do it, others will define it for you. That's the first advice that I would give to young people. The second advice I would give to young people is, once you understand that, do not let others limit your ambitions. Do not let them limit your abilities. Do not let them limit your capacity. You can control for that. And knowing that if you work very hard, knowing who you are and taking pride in that and doing your homework, then you're going to be okay.
Wow, incredible. Thank you so much. And that is really a beautiful way to end this interview. And definitely, yes, take pride in who you are and really know who you are. And I think it's the basis of everything. Until you know who you are, you can't really move forward.
You
So
can't. You
thank
really
you very
can't.
much for that.
You're very welcome. You know, one of the things because of the project you're working on, Christelle, and you may be familiar with her work, but a cousin of mine, Fama Diouf, in Senegal,
Right.
she does photography.
Okay.
If you have a chance, you may want to go and see on her Facebook or elsewhere. But she's done a series of photography of African women, and she had them sort of dressed in kind of queens.
Wow. Okay. Definitely.
She's done some incredible photography
Yeah.
that you may want to take a look at and see what's there. Because when you started talking about your work, it immediately made me think of Fama.
Okay.
Something, and it's in black and white. It's quite stunning. It's quite stunning, the work she's done on that. So maybe something you may want to watch, look for.
Fama Diouf, yes,
Yes.
I found her. I just Google quickly, but I will have a look, and I might reach out to her.
You may want to, yes. So I would suggest she may be one you may want to reach out to, just because her work is quite, because of her artistic work, it's really quite interesting. And she has an eye in the way she captures the essence of these things in a way. So look at her photography and so forth, but something definitely I would encourage you to look at.
Yeah, great. Thank you for that recommendation, and thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Christelle, and keep me updated. I would love to learn more about your work. You know, you were interviewing me, but I'd like to know more about you and how did you get to, you know, you said at 18 you moved to the UK, and so you've been in the UK since. You talked about being in higher education for a period of time. And so tell me, what are you doing now?
So now I've been jumping quite a lot. I've got different hats all the time.
Yes.
So I came to the UK to study really. So after university, I worked for Research Council for 10 years. The Research Council, I don't know if you know, it's the body who give funding to student and researcher in the UK.
Okay.
So I was looking, providing those funding, distributing the funding to university in the UK. And then within that organization, then I moved up and I work for, I was managing the international program. So it was more
Fantastic.
about connecting British researchers with overseas researchers. So my portfolio was India and China, which
Yes.
was quite interesting for a Black woman.
Oh, yes.
To work in
Yes.
China and India. You know, I had
Yes.
some trips to China and India, and some of the things that I would never forget as a Black woman traveling around by myself, trying to connect Indian or Chinese researcher with British researcher. But it was, you know, it was an incredible experience, even though it was quite interesting. So I was there for 10 years, and then I went into completely creative work. I want to train as a makeup artist for film
Wow. Yes.
and fashion.
Yes.
Again, I've done that for about 10 years on a freelance
Yeah.
basis because I just felt like, oh, I needed something creative. The creativity was calling me. So, and you know, in Madagascar, I grew up surrounded by women making clothes. So that's why fashion is just, I
Aesthetic.
love fashion.
Yes. Yes.
Um, and yeah, so I did makeup as a freelance for quite a long time, but then I moved. I was going between London and Bristol. London is really where the work for film and fashion is, but you know, my life was really in Bristol, so I ended up coming back to Bristol, and that's when I went back to education, higher education. So I worked in the university for about 5 years until the community work and the creatives called me again. So I always bounce back between education is always really important for me, like
Yeah.
you, because I think I didn't really have that chance when I was in Madagascar. So that's why some of the work I do now always go to schools,
Yes.
trying to empower the younger generation. So it's I think
Wonderful.
that education element into the project.
Wonderful. Yeah.
Um, and yeah, so we the project was originally just an exhibition, but in the schools and people in the community seen it and were really interested and keep asking for more. So we ended up developing a bit more. And actually today we started. Do you know Dobek Naore? She's from Ivory Coast. She's a singer.
What's the name?
Dobeknaore. So she came to do a workshop for us this morning. So this around the African queens again. So we are in the process of doing like a 2 weeks workshop with women from the community, and they're learning about African performance and African theater. So they're learning about, you know, talking drums and music and singing.
Yeah.
And yeah, this morning we had Dobe taught us some songs from Ivory Coast and from Zimbabwe. And so and for some of the women, it's the first time they really connect with African language, for example, or rhythm. So it's really incredible to see. Everyone was really excited this morning. So yeah, this is where I am at the moment. And yeah, for me, I think I really want to develop more work with Africa and trying to change the narrative of what people say about
That's
Africa.
Wonderful. Yeah, I mean, it'd be great. You know, I'd love for you and I to stay in touch, because I would love to see how some of the work you've done, if there's any way we can translate it back here in the US, because one of the things that you're seeing more and more with the racial reckoning that's going on in the US, there's really more, I think there's going to be more and more an appetite to really kind of understand more of the roots part of, you know, of particularly with the slave trade and everything else. And there will be, I think, a revival of interest in Africa. You know, you saw that with Black Panther. All of a sudden, Africa was immediately on the map. And everybody was starting to, you know, adopt African, you know,
and I don't know if you
Africa. You saw the clothing. I could see it among the Black community. It started to change immediately. There were all these things about Wakanda and all. I mean, it was quite interesting, this whole thing.
And it's the same with Beyonce, Black is King.
Yes.
That's also, everything is just inspired by Africa.
Yes. Africa, you know, I mean, you can see it everywhere now. And so I think understanding and knowing more about the history is what's so lacking, that anything we can do to amplify that, I think is going to be incredibly important, incredibly important.
Yeah.
And I've said this before, I really believe that if Black Africans knew more about Africa, it really would help with the sense of being. You know, you can't go back to, you know, you can't make up for that, but you certainly could have a much better sense of who you are and the resiliency and where resiliency comes from, in understanding more of that, about that roots. And so I've been really interested in how we can particularly creatively do that with this generation, how we can engage this generation in the knowing and understanding of some of this.
And the ultimate, you know, one of the aim I would love to develop this project is really to take about 10, 15 young people to some of the country where those African kings and queens come from. So Mali is definitely going to be on the one of the list. And yeah, I would love to just see the eyes of the young people when they arrive in Africa and see those places. So that would be really powerful, I think, for them, because you know, some of those children doesn't even leave the country. So yeah, and I think it's a different experience when you tell them this is what it's like, rather than seeing it, and seeing it is completely different. So
no, absolutely. So, but please keep me updated on your project. I mean,
no, definitely. And thank you so
congratulations much to you on this. I think it's such important work, and it's so needed. It's so needed in our communities and our world right now, that I applaud you for taking that on, and for really wanting to shed some light on this. I think it's really important.
Well, thank you very much for your time. And
you're welcome.
Yeah, and I will definitely be in touch again. And
absolutely.
Yeah, I know Solange was really keen for us to connect. So
yes, it's a small world. It's a very small world.
Yes, I went to college with Solange.
Oh,
so that's how we know each other.
That's how you know each other.
Yes,
okay.
In south of France.
Oh wow. Okay, that's the connection. It's a small world. Very small world.
Thank you very much, Fanta. And
you're welcome. You're very welcome. You take care, Kristen.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Bye.